For my CMM project, I had the opportunity to make a soundtrack for a video game that my friend Xavier was creating for his extended project qualification. This is a 2D game in which the main character must navigate through levels of platforms to get away from the enemy boss, while using the special abilities of teleporting and time travel to do so. My goal was to create a track that would be played during the main gameplay. As the creator of the video game, my partner gave me a few guidelines which the music would have to follow to effectively fit the mood and gameplay. I was given the task of creating a track inspired by the genres of heavy metal, while also implementing electronic elements through instrumentation and effects to create a blend that would highlight the digital nature of the project. Conveying the themes of teleportation and time travel became my main challenge, as I had to do so all while creating the right mood and atmosphere, whilst also adhering to the chosen genres. Fulfilling all of these goals would enrich the gameplay, which is ultimately my role as a composer. Throughout this process, I have to effectively communicate with my partner to make sure that my creative decisions support his vision of the project and fit the video game, and that I can effectively fulfill all these guidelines without compromising his original vision. To help, my partner provided a few sketches of the artwork and draft imagery that he drew while designing the game. This helped me understand the type of mood that the music needed to target to fit the game. From looking at these, I determined the target mood to be dark, cold, and have a slightly discomforting sound. Additionally, as reference for the soundtrack I would be making, he suggested listening to some work by Mick Gordon, who has made soundtracks in the style of metal for games like Doom. And other artists like Danger, who uses more electronic-based sounds and synthesized instruments. Now about my composition. It is called akrasia, a word which means the state of mind in which someone acts against their better judgment through weakness of will. This fits into the backstory of the game, in which the main character is a thief who is trying to steal from the enemy who they must defeat, while also using time travel and teleportation to help. I conveyed the concept of time travel in my soundtrack through the use of time signature changes and metric modulations, in which the different time signatures can often feel like a change of pace, or in some cases as if a beat is skipped. The opening section of the track starts in 6/8, in which the pulses fall into the 1st and 4th eighth note of the melody. If the listener was to nod their head to the music, it would be a relatively fast nod. Then, in the main motif, the time signature changes to 4/4, in which the pulse is felt on the 1st and 3rd quarter note of the melody. This is an example of metric modulation, as even though the tempo doesn't change, the move from 6/8 to 4/4 creates the feeling of halftime due to the change in pulse. Towards the end of the soundtrack, I created a riff in 7/8, which is an irregular time signature in which the feel is unusual due to the missing 8th note that keeps the feel from feeling like 4/4. In this 7/8 section, the listener might feel as if a beat is skipped, again signifying the concept of time travel, as the player might jump to another point in time. In this section, I then alternate between 7/8 and 8/8, or 4/4, to really accentuate the different feels of the time signatures. In the closing section of the soundtrack, I implemented a 1-beat rest on the 8th beat of the sequence that became a core part of the phrase. This small rest creates an unsettling sound, as it is unexpected and causes the pulse of the soundtrack to change for the listener, as the downbeat becomes less rigid and shifting through the section. This portrays the potentially detrimental consequences that the player can experience as a result of resorting to time travel. Lastly, I attempted to convey the concept of time travel through the use of digital effects, with a speeding up and slowing down effect being used on different tracks all throughout the song, such as this section where you can hear the guitar slow down and speed up before and after the breaks. This signifies how time can be slowed down and even reversed, almost as if this is what the main character would be hearing if they were to use the time travel function. After I recorded the main motif of the track and shared it with my partner said that it sounded too much like regular metal and didn't have enough electronic elements implemented into it. This led me to explore many of the electronic drum presets available in my digital audio workstation and took my track from sounding like to this. I made multiple versions of this when experimenting with the electronic elements, as I was trying to find a balance between the two genres, which didn't overuse the electronic sound effects and sounds. To achieve the desired cold and dark sound, I used chromatic notes, uncommon scales, and tritones throughout the piece. This can first be heard in the main motif of the track, where following the slides there is a descending chromatic phrase, which then changes to an ascending chromatic phrase on the second repetition. This adds ambiguity and an unusual listening element to the piece, which is fitting for the nature of the game. In the next section, the guitar riff consists almost entirely of notes that are chromatic. There was a challenge to make this riff sound natural and catchy enough while using the unusual set of notes, which are not within a single key. I found that utilizing a certain rhythmic ostinato, which is followed by all the instruments, combined with the guitar, can make an even unusual set of notes sound natural and cohesive. In one of the later sections, I used a fragment of the octatonic scale, also known as the diminished scale, as a transition into the next section. This scale follows a whole tone, half-tone pattern, which has a very unusual sound and induces a feeling of discomfort and being lost to the listener, conveying the mood of the game. This idea came through my exploring music research on Sibelius's Finlandia composition. Once I finished writing the ending section of the track, I realized that I had opportunities to use more dissonant intervals and changes, and ended up rewriting the section to include a few more cases of chromaticism and a tritone chord change, essentially to tie the whole piece together with a chromatic harmony used through the rest of the piece. Before and after. Finally, the piece ends in a distorted diminished chord which rings out and serves as a transition back to the beginning of the track. Being written for a video game in which the playing duration isn't set because of its dependency on the player's actions, having the ability to loop endlessly is an important aspect of the track. Because this last chord is the same note as the very first note of the track, it is able to loop seamlessly. Overall, the biggest collaborative challenge was organizing the time to meet with my partner and show them the progress in real life. Due to the different schedules we have at school, it was often a challenge to find a time to meet and discuss the progress of the game. Occasionally, the feedback had to be given digitally by me sending the file to my partner and having him listen to it on his own. I found that this medium of communication did not hinder the quality of the feedback. Throughout the process of communicating with my partner and ensuring my creative decisions were effective, I realized the importance of keeping an open mind while writing the soundtrack, because at the end of the day, my role as a composer for the video game is just to fulfill the needs of the game creator, meaning that as good as an idea might seem, if it doesn't align with the vision of the game creator, it is not an effective creative decision. There were a few times where I had to make the decision not to include a certain riff or even an entire section, or instead add a significant part because something simply did not fulfill the creator's wants. I learned not to let this be discouraging, as it is just part of the working process for a composer. This didn't mean that I always blatantly disregarded certain pieces of work. I learned to discuss the technicalities of my work with my partner and come to creative agreements by changing certain technical elements so that it retains the originality while still fitting to my partner's vision. Here is my soundtrack under the gameplay of the video game created by my partner.